All right, page 3, last page of our test review for chapter 9 test. In this page, we've got 4 solving a nonlinear system problem, which is what we just talked about for 9.6 on Tuesday. And then our last one is a word problem for the last one, which is, again, just going to be, depending on what method you choose, something from the rest of the chapter. So with our 4 different system problems, I'm going to do for all of these substitution, because I've told you guys before, substitution is what I find the easiest. Looking at my equations, all 4 of them have your equations solved for y already. So it is super easy and super quick to do that substitution immediately without having to do any extra work to the equation. But if you are an elimination person, I will do one of these by elimination just to show you that. But when I went through and did these, I did all of them using substitution. So I'm just going to do number 16 with elimination. The other 3, I'm going to do substitution just because that's my preferred method. So let's just start with number 13. For number 13, we have 2 equations set equal to y. And if we're doing substitution, remember that tells me that since I know negative 4x plus 2 in my bottom equation is what y is equal to, I can substitute that in for y in my top equation. So that gives me negative 4x plus 2 equals x squared minus 4 minus 2. So now from here, it's a problem like we did on the previous page, on page 2. So depending on what method you want to choose, I'm going to push everything over to one side. So I'm going to add 4x and subtract 2, add 4x and subtract 2. That gives me 0 on the left side, right, because both of those canceled out. X squared. Looks like my x's cancel out as well, and I have minus 4. So now, this kind of goes from what I was assuming was a factoring problem into a square root problem, because I can easily add 4 on both sides and get that x squared is 4, so I square root both sides and I get that plus or minus 2 is what x is equal to. So I get those 2 solutions. I get positive 2 and negative 2. So remember, once I have my x values, I have to find the y value for each of them. And I get to choose whichever of the 2 equations I want to plug it back into my system for. So I'm going to switch to green here for this last step, for this step. And here, when I'm trying to find the y value of positive 2, I'm using the bottom equation here. That tells me that negative 8 plus 2, not 8. So y is negative 6. So one of my 2 solutions I'm going to put down here at the bottom. When I plugged in positive 2, I got negative 6. And that's solution number 1. I'll switch back to green. Actually, no, let's go purple. If I plug in negative 2 into that same equation, I get y equals positive 8 plus 2, so I get positive 10. So when my x value is negative 2, my y value was positive 10, and that is my other solution. That's my second one. And that's it. Once I have my x and my y values, I'm just writing them as ordered pairs. Circle my answer. Okay, moving along. For number 14, and number 15 is actually similar to this as well. I don't understand why anyone wouldn't do substitution for this right away. You have one of your variables already solved for you. You know that for your point or your 2 points, depending on how many solutions there are, that your y value for that point is going to be negative 7. Guaranteed. They tell you that that's the case. So if you're not doing you're not doing substitution in here with negative 7 for y, you're doing too much work for yourself. Because we have right away negative 7 equals negative 5x squared plus x minus 1 So I'm going to go ahead and add 7 on both sides. And I get that 0 equals negative 5x squared plus x plus 6. So from here, you've got your two choices. This is factorable. It's not obvious. It's not going to be easy to Xbox factor this, but it is possible. Or you could always use quadratic formula. For example purposes, I'm going to go ahead and just use quadratic formula because that's what most people are going to go to anyway. So here my A value is negative 5, my B value is 1, and my C value is 6. So when I go ahead and plug that in, let's move that over a little bit, we have x equals negative 1, so negative B, plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times A times C. And I'm going to move this over just because I ran out of room, and I can do that on here. Sucks to have regular paper, doesn't it? Times, that was a positive 6, right? Right. All over 2A. 2 times negative 5. So simplifying from here, negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1. Let's see, that's 2 negative, so it's going to be a plus. 4 times 5 is 20, times 6 is 120, all over negative 10. So that tells me negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 121, all over negative 10. So negative 1 plus or minus 11, all over negative 10. So I'm going to have to split this off into my two separate equations. Negative 1 plus 11 over negative 10 would be 10 over negative 10. So negative 1. And then once, I'm going to use subtraction. So that gives me a negative 12 over negative 10, which reduces to a positive 6 over 5 for my two x values. Now again, with this, we already know my y value, so I don't need to plug this back in. I could plug in negative 1 into my top equation, but I know I'm going to get negative 7, so there's no point in us doing that, unless you want to do that to try and check your solution. So all I have to do now to finish my problem off is just put those two x values paired together with negative 7. So my two solutions are negative 1 comma negative 7 and 6/5 comma negative 7. Okay. 15, very, very similar. You've already got one of your equations solved for you already. This is a quick, super nice, easy one because I'm just doing that substitution right there. It gives me 8 equals 2x squared. I divide by 4. I get, sorry, I don't know why I'm dividing by 4. Subconsciously, I know 4 is going to be my answer coming up here. I should be divided by 2, and I realize x squared equals 4. So when I square root both sides, I get x's plus or minus 2. Apologies if anyone is confused by me flipping the order that I write it in. I just like my x values on the left. Personal preference. So those are my two x values. I already know my y value. So just like that, with that little work, I know that positive 2 comma 8 and negative 2 comma 8 are my two solutions. You should be hoping for 4 problems just like that one. Unfortunately, you only get one like that. Okay, last system problem for number 16. Again, I told you I was going to do one elimination type problem just to demonstrate for those that prefer that method. So with elimination, Remember, we will need to make sure that if we're going to eliminate my x's, all of my x's need to get eliminated. And again, I know it's tempting looking at negative 2x and positive 2x and saying, hey, look, my numbers are already same number but opposite signs. Why can't I just add my numbers, my equations up, and then my 2x and my negative 2x are going to cancel out and eliminate my x? But unfortunately, I still have this 3x squared, and I would have my 2y values here as well. So I can't do that. It doesn't work, because I need to eliminate all of my variable terms for one specific value. So what I have to do here is eliminate my y values. So remember, for that, I'm going to multiply one equation by something to get my coefficients to match, but with one positive and one negative. So in this case, I'm going to multiply my bottom equation by a negative. So I'm just going to flip the sign. When I do that, my top equation does not change. My bottom equation becomes negative y equals negative 2x minus 1. And when I add up going down, my y's cancel out. So I'm left with 0 equals, well, 3x squared doesn't have any like terms. Negative 2x and negative 2x is a negative 4x. 3 and negative 1 is plus 2. So now you've got this equation to try and solve. So you could try an Xbox factor, you could complete the square, you could do quadratic formula. Again, just to show that process, I'll go ahead and use quadratic formula because it seems to be more popular than usual with this group. You guys, my students this year. So if I'm doing quadratic formula on this, x equals negative b, so in this case negative 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. Sorry, that was a positive 2. Supposed to be a positive 2. All over 2a. So negative 4 is just a 4, plus or minus the square root of 4 squared is 16, minus 4 times 3 would be 12, times 2 would be 24, all over 6, which is 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 8 all over 6. And at this point, you can stop. You recognize that I've got a negative underneath the square root, which means that this problem is unsolvable. We have no real solution. Nurse, NRS, no real solution because of this bad boy here. So that is the system of equation problems that you guys will have, well, you had on the review. They are very similar on the test. So make sure you are familiar with them. They are set up the exact same way. They're all set up where it should be easy for substitution. And looking at the style of the equations that you're given, they are also going to be similar on the test. So you're going to have two of them where one of your equations is already solved for one of the variables, like 14 and 15 are. Two of them are going to be a linear and a quadratic equation, like 13 and 16 are. Okay? So if you're still struggling, go back to 9.6 in your notes, or talk to me at any point before you start taking your test tomorrow. So anything before school, I'm available at 7 o'clock. During your study hall, if you want to pop in and see if I'm available. You guys should know my schedule by now. You can talk to me during lunch. I'm not in there tomorrow, so never mind about that. Oh, sorry, on Friday I will be in there. Yes, on Friday I will be in there. Sorry, I'm recording this at 11 o'clock at night on Wednesday before you guys are watching this, so I apologize for my sleepy-mindedness. Okay, last one, number 17. We've got a skier that leaves an 8-foot tall ramp with an initial vertical velocity of 28 feet per second. the function h of t equals negative 16t squared plus 28t plus 8 represents the height, h in feet, of the skier after t seconds. When did you hit the water? Round your answer to the nearest hundredth. Or you could have changed this to ground. Doesn't really matter. Someone nicely pointed out that we could have had a water skier hitting a ramp. Whatever you want. Whatever floats your boat or puts the wind in your sails or makes you happy. Doesn't really matter. We're trying to figure out, in this case, if we're trying to get a visual, we've got our skier. They're on their skis. You know, they curve up a little bit, whatever. There's two of them. We're jumping. It follows that parabolic path. And where we land back in the water or on the ground is what we're trying to figure out. So this we should hopefully recognize if this is the ground or this is the water, depending on which way you like to look at it. That's y equals 0, my height equaling 0. So all I have to do here to solve for my t values, my times, when I'm at height of 0, is by just plugging in 0 in for h of t. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink down my little sketch because I took up a lot of room for that. We'll just put him over here or her over there. So if I have the equation 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 28t plus 8, I'm just trying to solve that equation. So I would not bother trying to Xbox factor that. I would just head straight to quadratic formula. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So that should give me negative 28. I'm not going to try and squish that there. I'll go underneath. Negative 28 plus or minus the square root of, definitely going to need a calculator here. 28 squared is 784. Here I've got two negatives, so it's going to be a plus. 4 times 16 is 64. 64 times 8, I should know that one, 512. All over negative 32. So 512 plus 784 is 1296. So negative 28 plus or minus the square root of 1296 all over negative 32. So I can go ahead and square root that. That is 36. What a beautiful thing. So I'm going to go ahead and move this back over there because I am running out of room. I ended up with negative 28 plus or minus 36 all over 32. Sorry, negative 32. So I have to evaluate this two separate times. Negative 28 plus 36 over negative 32. And once where it is negative 28 minus 36 all over negative 32. So negative 28 plus 36 would be a positive 8 over negative 32, which that reduces to a negative 1/4, 0.25. Here, it being negative tells me that it happened before I jumped off the ramp, which makes sense. If they're considering this right here, I'm going to switch over to this orange highlighter. If they're considering this right here to be 0 seconds, you're already up off of the water because you're at the top of the ramp. So a quarter of a second before you hit the front of the ramp where they're saying time started, you're down on the water or ground level, whatever you're considering the situation to be. Okay, so that's out of the question. That's not when we landed, that's before we took off, which tells me this next one should be giving me a much better solution. So in this case, negative 28 minus negative 36 is a negative 64 over negative 32. That tells me positive 2. So I'm going to just put it in, I'm going to put it in the middle of this arc here. 2 seconds is how long until we land, or it's going to be when we hit the water. 2 seconds later. So that is going to be very similar on the test as well. Just be prepared. Depending on how I want to phrase it, it's really the same problem over again. You're just trying to figure out what your two x-intercepts are. One is going to make sense in the problem. One is not going to make sense in the problem. Like here, getting a negative 0.25 seconds doesn't make sense for that to be the time that we land. So the other one is going to be my solution, positive 2. Now there are some word problems similar to this in 9.5 in your textbook. So if you want to look back for some more guidance, some more worksheet, or some more practice on those, that would be the place to look for it. That does it for page 3 and the entirety of our test review. I'm going to go ahead and post this answer key along with the links for the 3 videos for my walkthroughs for the Chapter 9 test review. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I might respond to them tonight. Otherwise, I'll just try and find you, or you can try and find me in the morning. Again, Friday morning, I am available starting around 7 o'clock, and you can ask me questions anytime up to 7th or 8th hour, depending on when your class is. So, if you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a great day.